First of all, I'd like to encourage all of you to do something that is uncomfortable today, every day. I learned about Sarah's inability to come here about a week ago, so I'm giving her talk, but I've added some information and actually some inspiration from her talk that really affects how I do my work as a UX strategist at NPR. So my job is, I think a lot about our ecosystem of products, so how an audience member might, throughout their day, from morning to night, weekdays, weekends, use all of our products. And I've actually recently developed a model for how we might think about that, which involves the same kind of abstraction that developers and DevRel folks will do, and folks writing documentation, to abstract services for something like an API. So how many of you are familiar with NPR? Great, okay. So NPR, our mission, we are a mission-driven organization. So our mission is to work in partnership with our member stations. So we have stations throughout the country to create a more informed public. So that's a pretty big task, right? In the era of fake news and you know, we definitely, our challenge is to give people a deeper understanding of events, ideas, and cultures. So there are tons of stations throughout the United States, and we have bureaus reporting throughout the world. And so this is the part that I've added to Sarah's presentation, which is that I've realized that what we do, and this could apply to any of you, so feel free to use this model, we craft experiences to deliver outcomes for the audience. So an outcome is not opening an app and using an app, right? An outcome is something like catching up with the news, having a sense of place, connecting with someone. That's what I mean when I'm talking about an outcome. And all of those outcomes support our mission of creating a more informed public. And so we craft experiences. Well, what is an experience? An experience is something that you can know with your senses. So you can hear something, you see something, you feel something. So an experience might be listening to the news, or skimming the news, or watching a video. So I'm not telling you where that experience happens, on what product, or what platform, or in an app, or on a website, or on a smart speaker. So those are experiences. So you think about the sound of Audie Cornish's voice telling a story. That can be experienced. But at NPR, we think about inclusive design, which means that if you are deaf, you cannot hear Audie's voice. So therefore, your ability to have a sense of place in the story she's telling would need to come through perhaps reading that story. So the experience in that case would be reading, not listening. So now's the next level, which is products. So we build products on multiple platforms to deliver those experiences. So a product might be an app, it might be something else for the audience. So an example of this is our responsive website. This is our news app, NPR News, and actually this is a redesign of this app, so you can expect this in the next few months. And then this is the NPR One app. Has anyone heard of NPR One in the audience? Okay, we've got one person. So NPR One is a fairly new product that essentially delivers personalized listening. So you download the app, you log in, it starts to learn, not necessarily what you like, but it learns how to give you a flow of stories, both news and podcasts and all kinds of things, so that you feel like it understands you, but it also feels like it has the DNA of public radio. It sounds like what you would hear when you turn on the radio, but you can control it. You can press play, you can start it, you can skip things, you can mark things as interesting, so it starts to understand your signals. And you can also look things up and see what we recommend and all kinds of things like that. And it includes podcasts and other audio from all over, not just from NPR and from public radio. So we also abstract our experiences so developers and partners might build new products for our audience. So NPR One, I mentioned that it's an app. Well, it's also a service and an experience that is one people, like y'all didn't know this experience even existed of this sort of personalized listening. So we want to bring it to as many places as people are. So whether that's your Xbox or whether it's your phone or Apple TV or whatever. So here's some examples of on the left, the Xbox and Android Auto and Samsung Gear. And this is the Developer Center. So Sarah worked on a project to redesign this several months ago. And what the message she wanted to deliver to you is what she learned and a strategy and a workflow for how to work with your teams, your developers, your product owners, or your UX folks to develop. So why do we need this? Well, we offer what we're calling 21st century public radio. So this is a new thing. And what we've decided is this, we're essentially saying that the APIs we make available, the most important thing we think we could do is make this new form of listening available to our audience, right? So we're not, I've been around at NPR since about 2006 when we first launched our public APIs, and that focused on stories and audio, for particular stories and lists of things and topics. Whereas this is really focused on this brand new form of listening that includes authentication, that includes these signals so that we can start to know the audience better and then adapt to what they need. So we care about developers as we care about our audience, which means the methods we've used to redesign this site and the methods when we think about our developer partners is the same as we would as we think about our listeners and the folks who come to our website or use our apps. So I talked about the experiences and the idea that listening to the radio was an experience. Well, in my mind, developers, the experience is the act of creating. So the flow that you might get yourself into while listening to public radio, the flow that you might get into while coding is an experience. Let's take an example of a coffee shop. So how many of you like pour-over coffee? Fans of pour-over coffee? So I'm not going to say it's the best way to make coffee, but it is a way in which you can maybe get a higher quality experience of drinking coffee. So you can think about, like our audience, our listeners, the coffee drinkers, right? In this case, the person who is crafting the coffee, making the pour-over coffee, you could think of as a developer. Well, let's say that you wanted to get you also roasted coffee and you wanted to get your coffee out there in the world. Well, you want to make sure that the developers out there, the coffee makers out there, are doing the methods to make sure that experience. So it's not like, your beans couldn't be used anywhere to make coffee. We want to make sure that you're crafting the best experience possible. So the products that we think of are APIs and documentation. So here's an example. If I, was new to this and I found out about your coffee beans, and these are instructions I found that you made available, but they're about French press and they're about, roasting and all things, they're true information, but it's not necessarily related to the task and the task orientation I need as a developer in order to build the right thing. So we want to shift the focus from what the endpoints can provide to what I, as the developer, can do as an API. And so before we do anything, really understanding, as an organization, why are we making this service publicly available? Like I said, it's like the guy doing the pour-over who, is incredibly skilled at his job. He understands how to weigh everything, how to measure everything, how to release the gas in the coffee, all those kinds of things. What tasks might this person want to accomplish? And so we build relationships throughout our organization as we think about building this documentation. So it's not just the technical writers talking to developers, because our developers are using some of our internal APIs, right? They don't even necessarily have the mindset of someone who is out there, working for another partner or someone else trying to deliver the experience that we want them to deliver on a new product. So we might define personas. So this is a matrix of the different things you might think about as you develop personas for your audience. If you've attended some of the other talks today, you've learned about personas if you didn't know what they already are. So we think about how we can really think about the person out there who may understand what NPR is, but may think about live streaming and may think about stories and may think about text, and they don't even know this experience of personalized radio exists. So we have to help them understand what that is and help them to understand the type of experience we want to give them. So we did research. We met with folks who are in this position, and we got very detailed information about what wasn't working about the old documentation. And some of the things we found where the site was hard to navigate. It's difficult to understand our approach to authentication. We have this thing called ratings, where we learn about how you interact with audio, whether you skip it, whether you listen to it all the way through, whether you listen to the first 15 seconds of it. All of those are signals that help us improve your experience. So a developer has to understand why that's important to the end experience. And then we identify and prioritize tasks. So think about the common tasks that a developer might be trying to do, and structure the documentation around those tasks. And some of our takeaways for our redesign is that we should highlight those prioritized tasks. We should present the information according to the order of operations, shallow navigation, link to other checklists and other links to other more important things that may not be needed for that general impression of what we're doing and what the high quality experience we want to offer our audience. So we still provide the standard API reference docs, and once Sarah and her team, including Vince Farquharson, who's on the design team at NPR, someone I work closely with, this is what we found is we wanted to collect data to help us understand whether or not we had succeeded with this. And so we got good feedback about that, and we continue to improve our docs. So the benefits of doing this: scoping. In public radio, we have incredibly limited resources. Rapid prototyping helps us to lower the cost, to explore, and fail sometimes at things we think might work. Faster turnaround on QA. So some of the folks we need to think about are folks doing QA both internally. When we we often go through a process of looking at the products that outside partners have developed and evaluating and giving them feedback. So we're talking about an ecosystem of developers and partners that is within NPR, outside NPR. It includes stations often. And the end result is we want a high quality user experience for listeners across these platforms. And so we really can also apply this kind of thinking outside of just the docs or the developer center or the site, which is things like a developer newsletter, thinking about our app checklists, how we conduct surveys, who are we talking to, what is our audience for things like surveys, even conference calls and emails directly with developers, including our partners, understanding their perspective and understand what they might know. We've had a developer who took our information. We thought they were going to be delivering this personalized listening service, a new product to deliver NPR One's personalized listening, and we realized that they had produced something that played a live stream. So they completely missed the point of what we were trying to do with the old documentation. So back to the coffee example. So in this kind of a world, if we're trying to develop this kind of documentation for how to create pour-over coffee, we're focusing on things like, you need to place a filter in the cone, you need to grind to a certain coarseness. There's much more beyond this, obviously. The inspiration from a site like, one of the coffee producers like Blue Bottle or Stumptown, they actually do this really well on their sites. They provide this kind of documentation. So in your inspiration, as you think about creating your docs, you might even look at completely outside the world of code and APIs and look to other places that are trying to inspire folks creating things in the world to not only just create the thing you want them to create, but actually do it with the level of quality that you actually want, because your brand is on the line and the experience. And in our case, we want to create more informed users. In their case, they might want to create, and hook people on coffee and saturate the world. So I actually worked with Sarah on this. I'm thinking about a checklist, and there's a URL up here that where you can get this presentation, so you can use this checklist if you'd like, for how this might work in your organization as a workflow. Identifying the goals and priorities, the steps in defining personas and tasks, describing the tasks and the workflow in detail, and then the type of matrix you might create if you were to create personas and then share those personas with your team. Thinking about the role they might have in an organization, the goals that particular persona is trying to accomplish, the behaviors, how do they feel, how do they go about this, what's their problem-solving process, and the attitudes to how they feel, how they perceive themselves. Can you sort of infect those folks with the same internal passion we have in our organization for creating a more informed public? Can we help them see that they're actually part of that mission? So someone in the public or someone who's a partner, who is a creator, who is a maker, can actually have the same kind of impact that we feel as employees and folks at NPR. So I tried to keep this short so that we could catch up on time. If you have any questions, please feel free to grab me afterwards, and use this URL if you'd like to use those checklists. Thanks.